Welcome to Ink and Magic, a podcast where we read and discuss the writing craft, world building, and romance of paranormal and fantasy novels.
If you love books with bite, set in worlds of magic and mayhem, then you're in the right place. My name's Nikisha Shanae. I go by an S.
And I'm Leslie. I write as Elle Penelope. And welcome to the show.
Hey, Leslie, what's up?
Hey, Inez. We are recording 2 days before Christmas.
It's Christmas Eve.
Exactly. But we're hard at work for y'all.
One, there's no rest for the wicked. Two, I'm a practicing heathen, and this is a Monday. What else are you gonna do but work?
Right, but you got family. You've got your daughter in town who has abandoned you for the day.
Because I'm working. Of course she abandons me because I'm working. And it's hilarious. I think I was saying that, my daughter is here, and underneath the bed are really spicy romance novels and unopened, unidentifiable boxes of sex toys. And yesterday I was leaving out because I'm on this whole shibari trek, which is the Japanese art of rope bondage. Because originally it was about there were no jails in Japan, and this is how they tied up the prisoners before someone could come and collect them.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So it's a whole artistry stuff. Yeah. Some people take it super seriously, but I'm learning this in a sex club. So my daughter asked me, she's like, "Well, where are you going?" And I was like, my daughter is 23 years old. She's lived with partners, and I'm like, And truly, I'm there as an academic learning this because I'm really interested in self-suspension, and I really do enjoy the peace, the no responsibility that comes from rope bondage and being tied up.
Yeah.
Sorry, TMI for some of y'all out there, but I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I was bound the other day. I did my first. We are getting to our topic today. We are, but you asked. I did my first flight yesterday, meaning I was bound and suspended, and the teacher started to use me as an example, and as he was, and Leslie knows this term, belaying.
Yeah, like rock climbing belaying. So you belay in shibari as well.
Apparently. So as he was belaying me up and down to explain like a quick release of the rope, I was just like, I have no responsibility in this. People are learning around me and having conversations, and I just have to sit here. This is heaven. But I didn't say any of that to my daughter. I was just like, I'm going out with some friends. I'll be back in a couple of hours.
There's some things that daughters don't need to know about mothers. I think it's fine. Is it comfortable? It seems a little uncomfortable to be wrapped up in ropes and suspended.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't expecting the discomfort because I was only in a seated harness. I wasn't in a top harness. Gotcha. So I still had to hold my upper body up. And so the ropes ate into my hips.
Yikes.
And I was like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And he was like, yeah, you were bound with rope. The rope is going to bite you. I was like, wait a minute. I wasn't anything about that. But yeah. I am absolutely loving this class. I'm so enjoying this community. But again, that's maybe another conversation.
Maybe we'll have an episode on shibari or different types of research that you can do for your romance novels.
Because this did start as research, and then I was like, okay, I like this. This is fun. I want to learn more. But today we are talking about revision, which one of us happens to be a complete expert at. So
I have developed a formula or a strategy, a technique over the years for revision that I thought I would share. And I've been teaching workshops on this. And it's just, I'm in revision mode right now in my current work in progress. So it's top of mind. I've just gone through this process. So yeah, I thought it would be something of interest to the writers in our listening audience. So yeah, you come from a first draft. I do fast drafting, which means I do my first draft as fast as possible. No editing. I read it over a little bit, but I try to hesitate even reading it over. Like, I'm really just trying to vomit out the story. We had a professor at Howard who would say, you have to vomit out your first draft. He was talking about script writing, but it applies to whatever you're drafting. and just don't self-edit. Your editing brain is different than your drafting brain.
Yes.
And so, like, combining those two for me was not a road for success. I started out trying to edit, trying to get that first chapter perfect. A lot of writers do, and then you spend 2 months on the first chapter, and then you get to the end and you realize, "Oh, no, I have to change the whole first chapter that I
Yeah.
spent so much time on."
Yeah. So there are people out there, authors, writers out there who cycle, meaning they have to fix as before they can move on. And
Mhm.
we hear you. You are valid. You are amazing. There are also writers who do what is called writing into the dark, which I really feel like is cycling.
Mm.
They do the first draft, and by the time they get to the end, and they loop back
Mhm.
to any other new information, they loop it back in. I feel like that's really cycling too. Yeah, both
Yeah.
Leslie and I are the same. I guess we were formed at Howard University in the School of C, where we both do a dirty draft and we just vomit it onto the page.
Yeah. And so, I take that, and I've gone through times when I just immediately started at the end of the draft. I go back to chapter one and I just start revising and start working. And at a certain point, I was like, this is not the best idea because I'm still going through and I haven't taken the time to like address what's actually wrong. What am I fixing? And it just took 6, 7 drafts. My first few books, I was just iterating over and over again. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. So through a combination of taking classes, I think there was the Holly Lyle class. Rest in
Mm.
peace, Holly Lyle. She was one of our first virtual writing instructors.
Mhm.
She had lots of online courses, and revision was one of them, and a lot of things I took from her, and other books, other classes in writing. So one of the things I do to prepare for revision before I even there's a lot of steps before I actually start, chopping away back at chapter one again. And during the first draft, I actually am journaling. I'm making notes because I'm writing the first draft quickly. I already know there's things that are going to be wrong with it, but I'm not fixing them. But I do want to capture those ideas. So I journal, I write through the process how I'm feeling. I'm making notes about things that I think I'm going to change in the next draft. So there is a place in a notebook or a text file because I like text files because I don't like to format my notes.
I was going to ask that. So you're journaling in a separate handwritten notebook, not necessarily in the document.
Right. Yeah. It's either a separate document or a separate notebook. Exactly. So they're in a different place. Because I don't want to look at them when I'm writing because it's going to make me want to edit. And I
Mm.
know editing right now is not the right thing to do.
Okay.
So I'm making those notes, and I'm also just thinking about how I want it to be. So yeah, that's kind of like journaling about my feelings about what I'm writing. And also if I know specific things, like I already want to change that, I will write in the future in what I'm first drafting as if I've changed it. So like if I write the first chapter and the character is a newspaper reporter, and then in chapter three, I'm like, oh no, I actually want him to be a private investigator. I will continue in the book as if he's a private investigator, knowing I'm going to go back and change it in the next pass,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. So I don't have to change it right then. The next thing after the first draft is done is really look at what you have. I want to take some time away. I think it's important to take as much time as possible, but not too much time. So the sweet spot for me is like 2 to 4 weeks
Oh,
to
wow.
just give myself some space from the manuscript, try to forget a little bit so that I can come at it with really fresh eyes. More than 4 weeks, it tends to be too much time.
Okay.
It's hard to get back in the groove. And so usually during that time, I'm working on another project, I'm plotting something else. But yeah, sometimes it's only a week, depending on my deadlines. But yeah, that 2 to 4 weeks sweet spot is really nice. And
I do take some time off. Not I don't think I've ever taken more than a week
mhm,
off, and the reason that I would even take that much time off is because once I get to the end of a book, even no matter what stage it's in, whether it's the end of a first draft, end of a second, or I do total 4 drafts, if I'm in finishing energy, I need a minute before I
mhm.
can do something else, even if that is go and revise this. I need a minute to get out of finishing energy.
Yeah, like I need to clear my head a little bit out of the story. You're sunk in so deep that yeah, similar thing. But it's also like when I come back to it, I want I want to really look at it fresh. I want to evaluate it as objectively as possible and see all of the holes and all of that stuff. So my next step is to read it through. I will I don't necessarily print it out after the first draft, but I will sometimes put it on my Kindle or my iPad so I'm not on the computer with a keyboard because that is a thing that makes me want to edit. And I don't want to edit. I want to read. I want to read and
Mm.
make notes. And usually I'm doing some kind of story grid or some kind of spreadsheet. So I
What's the
have
story grid?
so Story Grid comes from a book called The Story Grid by Sean Coyne, who was an editor and former agent. And it's a way of, it's a really good writing craft book. It's sort of like intermediate to advanced. It's not for beginners. I would say it's going to scare you if you're a brand new writer. But if you've been in the game a while, it's a way of analyzing your story. And he's got this, he's got a lot of in there, but one of the actual grid part, which I don't actually do, but he has this sort of spreadsheet that you with different with different columns on it. And so sometimes there are a lot of columns, but you want to analyze what you have. And then he's got this whole way of gridding it and charting it, to which is a step too far for me personally.
Mm. Okay.
But I do like to chart certain things. Like usually I'm tracking POV character, what happens in the scene, the goal, the conflict, the turning point of the scene, the polarity, whether it changes positive or negative value, which is a concept that Sean Coyne uses that he got from Robert McKee and Robert McKee's book Story. Basically, the idea that each scene should change. So if it starts kind of negative, it goes positive. If it starts positive, it goes negative. And you want to track that because you don't want every scene to be negative, positive through the whole book. The pacing feels weird.
Mhm.
I will also track setting, time of day, because usually in my first drafts, I have no calendar. I don't know what day anything is happening. By the second and third, I want to make sure I know days, travel times, more details are coming in with each draft, and I'm tracking that. And that just gives me a big picture overview of the mess that I've made with my first draft. And tracking it just lets me like really look at the scene objectively, what's working, what's not. Often I don't have a goal. Sometimes there's no conflict in the scene. People are just talking and it's first draft, you have to give yourself some grace for that. But and I also make notes when I'm doing that read through about, okay, what should this scene be? What are my ideas to fix this? If there's no conflict, how do I change the scene to give it some conflict? If the character has no goal, what goal could they have in this scene? That kind of stuff.
That's fascinating. I don't track it outside of the manuscript, so I use Scrivener. Leslie does too. And so I use in Scrivener, you have in addition to the place where you actually write, you have an inspector. And inside the inspector, which is on the side of the screen, you have a place for a synopsis, which is like, what's happening in that scene. But then you also have a place for notes. And I use the notes section to write. I like to know what the scene's purpose is. That's really important because I'm so literally the plot. I'm thinking about plots as in
Mhm.
different plot points, and I will mix and match plot points across different plotting systems. Have a little save the cat, have a little hero's journey, have a little romance beats. I mix them all together. So I'm like, what is this scene? This scene is the meet cute. That's the purpose of the scene, for the hero and heroine to meet. And then underneath the scene's purpose, then I do GMC, goal, motivation, conflict. I have a place for setting because I'm so used to screenwriting where you just write exterior day. And that's all you had to do.
Right? Yeah, so easy. Description,
So I'm
what?
like, where is this so that I can go back and describe it? Because I never write descriptions in my first draft.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then
me
under
neither.
setting, then I have T for where's the tension point. So it's kind of
Mm.
like your emotional valence. But
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, what is the tension of if the motivation, if the goal is for her to confront him in this scene, her motivation might be because she thinks he stole her job. The conflict is she needs that job because she needs to earn money for her family. So the tension, she might be nervous to confront him, or she
Mhm.
might be angry. So that's what I'm tracking in the inspector.
I do that in Scrivener too. I use the metadata fields so I
Yeah,
can
you
create
do.
fields and at different points in time. So at this stage, I don't usually do that. I when I use that more is when I'm actually in the revision. And before each scene, I will enter, okay, what's the GMC of the scene? I might have the polarity. I might have those same fields there just to verify that I have that. I know what I'm writing. It helps me prepare to write the scene. So
Mhm.
similarly, and Scrivener is great because it allows a lot of flexibility for I love fields. I love a specific field for the goal and a specific field for the motivation because dumping it in notes is messy to me. But
Mhm.
like obviously everybody, and you can customize these things in Scrivener, which is great. So yeah, after I read through the entire thing, no editing at all, make my chart, I might not even look at that chart again. The act of writing it out
Mhm.
in the spreadsheet, and I tend to do it manually. So I will get a piece of legal paper and a ruler and draw lines on it because I want to be away from the computer sometimes, like I could do it in Excel and I have before, but it's nice not to be staring at a screen all the time. Um, but I use that process to get my mind working, my subconscious. And the next stage for me is to write a synopsis of the story that I want. So I'm a plotter. I always have a synopsis before my first draft, but I'm either revising that or just starting from scratch again with, okay, this was the mess that I made in the first draft. How should it be? Like, what is my vision for this book? If I'm creating a synopsis of this perfect book that I'm going to be crafting, I'm going to be fixing all the broken parts of my first draft. This is what it looks like. This is my map for my next draft of this novel. Then in here sometimes too, I will rewrite the blurb and the log line, which I often do before I start my first draft. So a lot of revision or preparing for revision is like reviewing all the stuff I did in what I call the pre-production of the novel, which is everything I did before I started drafting. Character work, obviously the plot, my vision statement, my goals for the book. Sometimes I will pre-write reviews that I want people to write about this book, do the blurb and the log line, do the back cover copy, all of that stuff. So a lot of it is like once I have this picture in my mind, I'm like visualizing, I want to manifest this book. So I want to like create what it should be. And a lot of times these synopses are 10, 15, 20 pages. I'm currently working on a synopsis that's like 22 pages, which is one of the longest ones I've ever done. It's very detailed. Each scene, uh, each scene gets a paragraph basically. And the next step is to break that into an outline. So actually number the scenes, give a little overview, and that is really the on the ground roadmap. Like day one, I want to be writing scene 1.1. Day two, I'm doing scene 1.2, like that kind of thing. I want to be able to get into that level of detail so that I can schedule and know exactly how long my revision will take. So the next step is actually doing the scheduling. And I have a system where I look at all these scenes that I've broken down. A lot of them will match up with the original. Some of them are new. So they're going to have different levels of effort. If there's a scene that I know I'm mostly keeping, I'm just going to polish it up, low level of effort. A medium scene might be, it needs more work. It's got the good bones, but I have to do a lot of rewriting. Medium, and then a high level of effort is brand new scene or a scene I have to redo from the ground up. And so I label all of the scenes in the book with high, medium, or low. And that lets me put them on a calendar and create a schedule. Because with traditionally published books, I always have a deadline. Even my indie books, I'm hiring my editor ahead of time so I'm always working with a deadline. And I need to know about how long it's going to take to revise, or if I need to ask for more time now. So I do a schedule, I print out a calendar, I say, okay, I've got 12 weeks to do this to my deadline. I've got, 30 high effort scenes. That's going to take me at least 2 or 3 days per scene. A low effort scene is going to take one day. And I write them like what scene am I doing on what day, giving myself time for not feeling like writing one day or maybe getting sick or something happening, life happening, giving myself a lot of buffer time, but plotting out how many scenes can I do each week. And then I'll know at the end of week 1 or 2 if I'm wildly off track and I need to beg for more time from my editor, or if I'm doing well. And so, yeah, all of this is to create this like really detailed plan for revision. And then once that's done, I just start revising. Day one, chapter one, scene one, I go. And I'm evaluating at the end of the first week and that second week. Did I do what I thought I was going to do? Am I ahead? Am I behind? And I will let that inform me, because if I have to ask for more time from my editor and my publisher, it's best to do it as soon as possible. You don't want to wait until the last minute. And even with an independent editor for my indie books, you really want to be respectful of their time and all of that. So if I know I'm going to have to push my publication date back because there is no way that I'm going to finish this book in time, it's best to just bite the bullet and tell everybody that as early as possible, because people can make plans and it's more professional. So that has been my way of the overview of figuring out my revision plan and coming up with all the roadmaps that I need to feel confident that I can, do the hard work of revising.
That's a lot. I was telling Leslie, before we got on, when we first started, we started our journey of writing together
Yeah.
separately. And then I remember reading an email from you when I was working in Atlanta. I was like, "I wrote this thing." You're like, "I wrote a thing too." I can still remember sitting and reading that email. But yeah, my revision is basically 4 passes, including that dirty vomiting draft. And my it all comes from being a stay-at-home mom for a little while. So I have the dirty draft, and then I sweep it clean, which is where because again, we come from screenwriting, so, descriptions were interior, room, day, exterior, park. That's
Right?
all we had to do. So I struggle with descriptions, and they're rarely in my first drafts. Rarely. People aren't wearing clothes. It's bare. Sometimes I don't even have names for characters because I'm thinking
Same.
dialogue action.
Yeah, me too.
That's how we were trained. Dialogue action, dialogue action. So my sweep is usually me coming back and putting that stuff there. And then I have the clean draft, and that's where I basically do my own copy edit, where I go in and I do what I upgrade the verbs. I kill the adverbs because sometimes there's just too many, you just don't need that many, and it's better to have an emotion. One stop shop for authors.com, which is also the books, the emotion thesauruses. Um, that is a godsend for me,
I
and so
love it
there's
too.
not always a heart pounding and a fist clenching every page. It gives me some better ways to describe emotion and tension. So I do that, and I love Maggie, the edit system.
Oh,
Margie Lawson. I love Margie Lawson's edit system, where she and it probably because it includes highlighters.
yes, colors.
Where you print out your manuscript, and then you highlight based upon different things that she's getting you to track. Most helpful to me is the description, which often isn't there, and the description gets highlighted in green.
Yeah.
Because for the longest time, my drafts were had no green. But you're also highlighting the dialogue, you're highlighting the action, you're highlighting the internal monologue, which is yellow, which gets used. I have tons of yellow highlighters that are half used
And the
because
emotions,
yeah, the
the
emotions,
visceral
which are
emotion
pink,
reactions. Yeah.
and the tension, which is orange. I can remember all this,
Mhm,
and it's really helpful for me to see it visually
mhm.
like that, um, so that I can see where the problem is. It's really helpful for me. So that I do that in the cleaning. Um, I I will type all the because I will make the corrections by hand, and I'll type it all in, and then I'll send it through. My favorite is Per Writing Aid as a grammar checker, but Per Writing Aid does more than just grammar. It looks for cliched writing. It looks for repeated words. So I love that, and then I send it to the editor. And once I get it back from the editor, I accept what I think is right, and I reject the very few things that I think are wrong, where maybe she just didn't understand me because I'm an artist. But before I finish my polishing, which again, dirty, sweep, clean, and then I polish it, I do an audio listen where I have the computer read it to me because I'm always afraid that I've introduced an error as I'm accepting and cleaning up the errors that the editor is pointing out to me.
Yeah, that happens too. So yeah, I do something similar. Like this described the story revision. Because for
Mhm.
me, my first draft, the story is not nearly right.
Okay.
And I have to rebuild the story for the second draft. Then I'm also, as I'm doing that, I'm polishing. So my revision actually takes place in 3 passes. Once I start this writing, I'm redrafting new scenes or I'm rebuilding like medium effort scenes. And then the next day I will go back and do a polish of the words, upgrading the verbs, making sure the descriptions are there because I also do not describe things. And I don't like a lot of description in what I write or read. I skim description, so it's not going to be really detailed, but you want to set the scene. And so, yeah, there's usually 2 to 3 more mini passes inside of that revision. And then it goes to an editor, which is usually a developmental editor for me, making sure the story is tight. I get that back, do another pass on the story, then do another polish, then copy edits, then proofread, and then it's done. So it's a lot of revision.
Revision is a lot. It is a lot. Yeah, by the do you know you're done when you're tired of the book, when you hate the book, when you're like, "I don't wanna see this again," until
Yeah,
it's in
like I
print and in your hands. You're like, "My
There is a time when you've read it so many times, and
Mhm.
especially with TradPub because, depending on the publisher, they have different there'll be several proofreads. There's a copy edit, there's a line edit, and then several proofreaders, and they're highlighting things, and they're sending you just random pages, like, "What about this? What about that?" And you're like, What?" And it's just you just read it so many times, and then there's pass pages. You have to look through it again, and then there's first pass and second pass. You read it so many times, and it's like, I don't know if this is good anymore. I hope someone likes it because I don't even know what this is about.
What are words?
Right? Ah, it's exhausting. But, like, revision
Mhm.
overall is where I feel like I'm really writing because I hate first drafts. I hate vomiting on the page even though I found it to be necessary. It just doesn't feel like real writing to me. It feels like I'm just putting poo-poo on the page, and not till I get to clean it up do I feel like an actual writer who is, good with words and metaphors and even just the concepts, like the themes and the imagery and the symbolism, like, that doesn't come for me until 2nd, 3rd draft, so
Mhm.
it's a struggle to get through that first draft often, but obviously you can't have a second draft if you don't have a first draft.
This is true. This is the way it works. There's no other way.
Right.
I like to be my brain is really good at compartmentalizing, and I like to be in all of the phases of writing all the time. Meaning, I like to be vomiting or drafting one book, revising the book that I wrote previously, and then planning the next book. And I will divide up my day so that I'm touching one of those phases every single day because when I'm just drafting, I get tired quick. When I'm just revising, I don't
Mhm.
wanna. I love plotting, but I always will get, like, I feel like I'm not doing anything. So I like to touch every single phase every day as often as possible.
Yeah, I can do up to 2, and it has to be different stages. So if I'm working on 2 books at once, it has to be a drafting and a revising or a plotting and a revising. I cannot revise 2 things at once
Mhm.
because it is so tiring. It's
Yeah.
draining. Revision is for me the most draining part. I feel like I've worked out. I went to the gym for an hour after writing for a little while. So yeah, splitting it up if it's and there's times when I can only do one thing at a time, and I have to just honor my energy in that way.
It's fascinating how this is my favorite thing. I love people telling me about their processes so that I can see, well, how do you do it? Well, I've never thought of it that way because it's your brain that I'm listening to now. And my brain be like, yeah, that's cute, but yeah, we're not going to do that. So yeah, go
Exactly.
back to what you were doing.
Yeah, I like hearing it, and maybe you get a little tidbit that you can try, but a lot of times it's unless you're having a problem. If you're like, "This is not working, what I'm doing is not working," and you're on the hunt for things that might work better for you that you haven't tried, that's great. But otherwise, it's just like curiosity and like, "Oh, maybe there's a little tweak I can try to improve the process a little bit." So yeah, that is revision. I hope that you will try something new if you would need to, or you just enjoy hearing how our brains work.
Or you're scared and how our
Yeah.
brains work.
Yeah, often when I tell people things, they're like, "What?" I get this, like, dazed, glassy-eyed look like, "Okay."
I just said, hi, Leslie. That's all I said to you. 20 minutes later.
I'm still talking about revision.
So, guys, we'd love to hear if you have a revision process that's similar to ours, different than ours. If you have not revised yet, if you're still getting through your first draft, maybe if one of these ways, one of the things that we've said, lights up your brain, we'd love to know if it worked for you.
Yeah. And I have a workshop on revision that I'll put in the link in the show notes if you want a little bit more detail on the process I described.
So, Leslie, since it's Christmas Eve, and there's been so much magic going on this year, and we've read so many books. Did you finish your Goodreads book challenge yet?
I have not checked because I was behind. I've got 7 days left, come on, or
You
8.
do, and I have every faith in you. I did finish mine, and so now is the time of year where it's Christmas movies that are on every single channel. Some are playing the same movie over and over again. I would love to know if you are watching, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Christmas, but any holiday inspired movie or piece of media that you're consuming.
I Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, my mom has a big party every Christmas Eve with all the family. And then usually, Christmas Day, those are her favorite holidays. So she's always been a big Christmas person.
Yeah, it's not like it's color coded or anything.
It's so for those who don't know, my mother, she has like 5 Christmas trees in her home, but under the main one, it's a different color scheme every year. This year is pink, white, and gold. I don't know how pink becomes a Christmas color, but and you have to have wrapping paper. Your gifts have to be wrapped in paper that matches the theme. Otherwise, they cannot go under the tree.
I
They
love
have to
this
be
so much.
hidden in the corner under the couch somewhere that it does not mess up her aesthetic. Yeah. So I had to go find
Oh
some
my
pink
god.
Christmas wrapping paper for the aesthetic tree and wrap my gifts in it, or they'd be shunned.
I love it so much.
Yeah, and usually we just have like Hallmark movies are a staple of our Christmas because my mom likes that. And of course, The Christmas Story is always on. So there's just the classic ones. I don't personally have favorites that I love. I will sit down and watch It's a Wonderful Life. I like classic movies. I grew up because my mom loved classic movies. We always were watching Turner Classic Movies in our house. So like the old school ones, my brother too. Like our whole family just has this love of classic movies. So like White Christmas, the
Mhm.
old school cheesy ones that a lot of people don't like anymore are on in our house, and we will like catch them because we're so familiar with them. You don't have to watch them from beginning to end. You just jump in and you know what's going to happen. So that's how our Christmas goes. Miss Heathen, how do you have any
That's me.
beloved holiday movies or books?
I do. I stopped celebrating Christmas as a kid when I finally sleuthed it out and figured out that Santa Claus isn't real. Sorry, spoiler if there are any children listening, sorry. But I was upset. I still accepted the gifts because I was raised polite. But I was over it. And so my kids did not grow up celebrating Christmas in my home. I loved Kwanzaa. So I got divorced when my oldest was 8. So I was always happy to send them with either my mother or their father's mother, who is another one who does Christmas big. But the funny thing is, I adore Christmas songs and
Mm.
Christmas movies. I get so excited walking into, like, the grocery store or the shopping mall and listening to Christmas songs. Like, 2 of my favorites are the Mele Kalikimaka. I love that song, and The Man with the Bag, that's another one of my favorites.
I don't even know that one.
Oh my god, I love Christmas songs. So, I absolutely love songs, but I also love Christmas movies, and I there was a time where I would sit down, as early as 2 years ago, where I would sit down and give them all ratings and reviews.
Wow, that brain never stops.
No, it doesn't. I love Christmas movies. My favorite, and you're welcome in advance, is this movie called Holiday Handcuffed for the Holidays.
I've seen this. Is Sabrina the Teenage Witch is in this?
Yes, and Mario Lopez.
Yeah.
It's the funniest thing. I just thinking about it makes me laugh. Okay, it starts with Sabrina. She's having the worst day ever. Like, you immediately are on her side. Even though she's about to do something crazy, you are on her side. She gets broken up with. She's having trouble at her job. Her perm job goes wrong. And she has to go home to Christmas, and she just and her boyfriend breaks up with her. She just cracks, and you see she's such a good actress. You see her crack under this pressure, and homegirl literally handcuffs Mario Lopez and is like, "You're coming home with me. I don't know you. You're coming home with me," and it makes so much sense. You're rooting for her. You're like, "Yes, that's right, girl. You take him. You take him home." It's the funniest movie, and it's just wonderful, and of course, it's a romance. So, eventually he forgives her for the handcuff. He plays along because she's wounded and he's wounded, and they're the perfect balm to each other's wound, and,
Aw.
it's so good. So, yeah, I'm about to go watch that again. Favorite.
Well, I might have to watch it again now on your recommendation. It's been a few years, so
Yes. Yes. Guys, we would love to know what your favorite Christmas movies are, as well as your revision process. We want to thank you so much for joining us. Please let us know what you think. You can leave a comment on YouTube with your thoughts on the episode. Please do share it with a friend who loves romance and maybe a couple of Christmas movies as well. And don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
And you can always check out our book schedule on our website, inkandmagic.net, to read along with us the final few Side Changeling Trinity books that are out as of now. I'm getting sad already as we come to the end. But we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.